Welcome to ADMC Spring Break 2019. My name is John Gibbons, and I'll be your guide through this report on the demographics of pets and pet supply spending. A little bit about my background. I have over 45 years experience in consumer products. The last 30 years have been in the pet industry. During that time, I've focused on sales, marketing, strategic planning, and corporate management. The spending numbers that you'll see in this report were calculated from data in the Consumer Expenditure Survey, which is managed by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. The field work on the survey is done by personnel from the Census Bureau. That field work consists of interviews and diaries from over 42,000 U.S. CUs. CU is short for Financially Independent Consumer Unit. It's very similar to the term household, but is actually more defined in terms of their financial independence and spending decisions. The Census Bureau also selects and monitors the sample to ensure that it matches the current demographics of the U.S. population. Now let's get down to business. As you can see, pets and pet supplies spending, which includes both live animals and pet supplies, but not food or treats, was $19.81 billion for the 12-month period from July 1st, 2017 to June 30th, 2018. That's an increase of $2.38 billion, 13.6% over the same period 1 year earlier. Let's put that $19.8 billion into historical perspective. This chart covers the period from 2011 up to the latest report. As you can see, like pet food, pet supply spending has been on a roller coaster ride. However, the driving force is much different. Pet food is needs spending and has been powered by a succession of must-have trends. Pet supply spending is largely discretionary, so it has been impacted by two primary factors. The first is spending in other major segments. When consumers ramp up their spending in pet food, like upgrading to super premium, they often cut back on supplies. However, it can go both ways. When they value shop for premium pet food, they take some of the saved money and spend it on supplies. The other factor is price. Pet supplies prices reached their peak in September 2009. With a few brief exceptions, they've been generally deflating since then. In fact, at the end of 2017, they were down 5.3% from 2009. Although it's not a hard and fast rule, price inflation in this segment can retard sales, usually by reducing the frequency of purchase. On the other hand, price deflation generally drives supply spending up. Innovation can trump both of these. If a new must-have product is created, something that significantly improves the pet parenting experience, then consumers will spend their money. A perfect example of this is the successive waves of new food trends. Unfortunately, we haven't seen much significant innovation in the supplies segment recently. Recent history gives a perfect example of the supplies roller coaster. In 2014, supplies prices dropped sharply, while the movement to super premium food was barely getting started, and supplies spending went up $2 billion. In 2015, consumers spent $5.4 billion more on pet food, and at the same time, pet prices went up 0.5%. This was a killer combination as supplies spending fell $2.1 billion. In 2016, consumers value shop for food, saving $2.99 billion. Supplies spending stabilized by mid-year then increased $1 billion in the second half when prices fell sharply. Consumers were spending some of their saved money on supplies. Supplies prices continued to deflate throughout 2017, and food spending increased $4.61 billion during this time, but this came from a limited group, generally older CUs who were less focused on supplies. The result was a $2.74 billion increase in supply spending. This was a bit of a break from the overall pattern of trading dollars between segments. That brings us to the first half of 2018. The spending increase in pet food slowed to only $250 million. However, supplies prices switched from deflation to inflation late in the period. Prices increased by 0.6%, but not until May, so most of the spending in the first half had already been done. During this period, supply spending increased by $1.23 billion, so there was no major impact from the upturn in prices. Although we should probably note that the less price sensitive over 150,000 income group accounted for 0.91 billion of the increase. If the supply segment could become a little less sensitive to minor inflation and increase spending in other segments, it would be great news for manufacturers and retailers, encouraging stronger, stable growth like we've had in the last 24 months. Now, let's see who's spending most of the $19 billion. In this chart, we look at pet supply spending in terms of 10 demographic categories. In each category, we will identify the group that is responsible for most of overall spending. Our target number was to find demographic segments in each category that account for 60% or more of the total. To get the finalists, we started with the biggest spending segment, then bundled related groups until we reached 60%. Unlike pet food, we were able to do this in every category. The categories appear in ranked order by pet supplies market share in red, from highest to lowest. We also include in dark blue their share of total CUs, and in green their performance. Performance is the share of market versus their share of CUs. You get that by dividing the share of market by the number of CUs. Anytime that this performance exceeds 100%, meets or exceeds 100%, then the group is earning their share of the spending dollars. A spending performance over 120% in any of these big groups means that this demographic measure is extremely important in generating increased pet spending. It also means that other segments in this category are generally underperforming. Like pet food, we have 6 groups with 120+% performance. 5 of them are the same, but in pet supplies, education replaced number in the CU for 120% performance. Now let's take a look at each one of the categories. Race ethnic first. White, non-Hispanic is number 1 in share and 4th in importance. This group has had the biggest share of supplies spending literally forever, and probably will remain so unless we start seeing the expected demographic changes in our society. Let's take a look at number in CU. It just takes 2. Putting 2 people together is very important in pet ownership and spending. However, unlike food, their performance is below 120%. This is driven because two people only CUs are slightly less focused on supplies than food. Housing. Home ownership. Having more space that you control has long been a key factor in pet ownership and spending. Amazingly enough, the share of market and performance for supplies is exactly the same as food. Income. Income is the most important factor in spending in every pet industry segment. Like food, $50,000 is a key income waypoint. However, supply spending truly takes off when income exceeds $150,000. The performance rating reaches 229%. Higher education generally means higher income. This shows up in supply spending as the performance group is over 120%. In supplies, this category ranks 5th in importance. In pet food spending, it ranked 8th. CU composition. Once again, married couples rank 2nd in overall importance, just like food. However, in supplies, the performance is higher in CUs with children rather than just a married couple alone. Age. 35 to 64-year-olds. This group contains the 3 highest income groups in the age category and correlates to our observations on income. However, in supply spending, the best performers are the younger 35 to 54-year-olds. In food, it was the 55 to 64-year-old age group. Number of earners. Income matters most, but how many people are working has become less important. Although the performance doesn't reach 120%, 111.6% is much higher than the performance of 94% in pet food. Occupation. The performance of all wage and salary earners is only 104.4%. Once again, the share of market and performance exactly match what it was in pet food spending. And the performance is driven lower because of the disparity of income between managers and workers. There's also an extraordinarily high performance by the self-employed in supply spending with 175%. Area. The suburbs have the biggest share of spending in every segment. In supplies, the performance is markedly better than the 100% break even in food. Center City also has better performance, but the rural performance in supplies is literally half of the performance in pet food. Now, let's take a closer look at the 2 most important and popular demographic measures, age and income. First, we'll look at spending by income group. As we've said numerous times, income is the most important factor in increased pet spending, especially in pet supplies and both the service segments. Let's review the specifics of this chart by looking at the over 70K group. Dark blue is spending mid-year 2017, and you see it was $10.19 billion. The red is spending for total year 2017, and it was $10.74 billion. The light blue is spending in the most recent report, mid-year 2018, and it was $11.67 billion. We can do a little math now if we subtract 1019 from 1167, we see that they were up 1.48 billion from a year ago. Also, the green outline indicates an increase, whereas a red outline indicates a decrease. We can also find out what happened in each of the halves. If we subtract the 1019 from 1074, we find out that they were up 55 billion in the second half of 2017 from 2016. Now, if we subtract 1074 from 1167, we see that in the first half of 2018, they were up a whopping $0.93 billion. The under 70 and over 70 have a very similar pattern in the second half of 2017. But as you can see, the spending took off for the higher income group in 2018. Let's put their overall performance into perspective. The over 70K group has 39% of all CUs, but accounts for 59% of supplies spending. However, they're getting even stronger as they generated 62% of the total increase, with 63% of this coming in the first half of 2018. As you can see, the increase in supply spending was widespread across income groups, with the only yearly decrease coming from the 70 to 100,000 group. They were down slightly in both halves. We should note that they did have a big increase in food spending during this time, so they may have been dialing back their supply spending. By far, the biggest increase came from the over 150,000 group with a $1.54 billion lift. They were up 40.2% and accounted for 65% of the segment's total increase, and they did this while having only 11.9% of all CUs. However, we should note that this group is gaining members faster than any other income segment. Their CU count is up 13.9% from a year ago. There are a couple other minor dips in spending we should note. In the 100 to 150,000 group, we see that their spending dropped $0.06 billion in the second half of 2017, and in the 50 to 70,000, their spending dropped $0.08 billion in the first half of 2018. Another interesting situation is the remarkably even distribution of supply spending among the groups from $30,000 to $100,000. You see this 2.81, 2.86, 2.47, 2.79 in total spending. The under 50,000 group spent $5.7 billion total, while the 50,000 to 100,000 group spent slightly less at $5.3 billion. However, the under 50K group accomplished this with 47.6% of CUs in the US, while the 50 to 100,000 group only has 27.6%. As you can see, there's no doubt that money matters in pet supplies spending. Now let's look at spending by age group. Oh boy, talk about consistency. Every age group had an overall increase and an increase in each half. The group from 25 to 64 each increased spending by approximately $500 million. The older and younger groups both had smaller increases. This says that obviously the factors affecting pet supply spending in the last 12 months were relatively evenly spread across America, at least in the 25 to 64 year class. Now let's see what's happening in supply spending at the start of 2018 across the whole range of demographics. In this final chart, we will list the biggest dollar moves up and down by individual segments in 11 demographic categories. Please remember the increase in the first half of 2018 was $1.23 billion, slightly more than the $1.15 billion in the second half of 2017. In 4 of the 11 categories, all segments increased supply spending. Actually, only 9 of 82 individual demographic segments started out 2018 by spending less on supplies. That means that 89% were up. That's pretty widespread growth. There are a lot of what I call the usual suspects on the chart. In the winners category, you have 150K plus, 2 earners, white non-Hispanic, homeowners with mortgages, and suburban livers. In the losers category, we have retirees and Hispanics and single parents. Although we should note that retirees and Hispanics both had a big lift in pet food spending in the first half of 2018, so they may have been trading dollars. There are a couple of surprise losers in this. Advanced college degree and 70 to 99K income group. But like the other 2 losers that we mentioned before, both of these groups had a big increase in pet food spending in the first half of 2018, so they were also probably trading dollars. Obviously, the lift is very demographically widespread, but we see that pet supply spending does skew a little bit younger than pet food spending, with the 35 to 44-year-old being the leading spending gain and Gen Xers. So far, the supply segment has had a great 12 months, and 2018 is off to a very good start, as you can see. But the winning streak is actually 24 months. It began in the second half of 2016. Since then, spending on pet supplies has increased an amazing $4.97 billion, up 33.5%. It has also been very widespread. Of 82 separate demographic segments, only 1 has spent less on supplies than the last 24 months. The greatest generation. The reason for this decline is unfortunate but can't be helped. The number of CUs for these 91-plus-year-old Americans has decreased by over 40% during the period. Let's review the market conditions that help to foment this amazing wave of pet supply spending. We have to first note that the world changed for supplies because of the Great Recession. Prices have been generally deflating since then, and spending in the segment has become more sensitive to changes in price. Prices go up, spending drops. Prices go down, spending turns up. This situation did not exist prior to the recession. The other factor in spending is spending in other segments, especially food. Whether this is a conscious decision or not, pet spending comes out of one bucket. A big increase in one segment can result in a cutback in others, and big savings in one can generate more spending in others. The recent upgrade to super premium food was such a big dollar commitment that it magnified this effect. In mid-2016, the market was just coming off the first big wave to super premium, and consumers were starting to value shop, so dollars were available. Pet supplies pricing turned down and continued to decline for 22 months. The time was ripe for a big lift in supply spending, and it certainly happened. At the same time, a new wave was starting in the super premium food movement. This could have derailed the supplies lift. However, it turned out that the demographic segments that were upgrading to super premium food were less focused on supply, so the impact was negligible, and supply spending continued to grow. That brings us to mid-year 2018. What comes next? A new food trend could be starting, but it appears that that lift may be minimal in 2018. A bigger concern is inflation. Supplies prices turned up in May of 2018 and by year end had increased plus 2.3%. We have not seen anything like this since the pre-recession price glory days of 2009 when prices increased 3.2%. Unless consumer price sensitivity has gone away, this does not bode well for supply spending in the second half of 2018. However, we'll have to wait and see. We'll get that data in September of this year. Well, that concludes our report on pet supplies. I want to thank you all for your time. Once again, my name is John Gibbons. If you have any questions, you can reach me on my website, petbusinessprofessor.com, or email me directly at gpsforpetbusinesses@gmail.com. I hope you all have a very productive show and a great 2019.